Okay, we're picking up with example 4 out of Unit 5, Lesson 6. Example 4 says, Jenny thinks there are more than 10 pages of advertisements in every issue of a particular magazine. Using a sample of 42 magazines, she calculated a mean of 10.5 pages with a standard deviation of 1.6. Test the hypothesis at 1% significance. So the first thing we want to do again is figure out what is the claim and what are the hypotheses. So it says in the problem, Jenny thinks there are more than 10 pages. And more than 10 would be greater than 10. So that is a claim mu greater than 10. The mean number of pages is greater than 10. This thing does not include an equality sign, so the opposite of greater than 10 would be less than or equal to 10. And that's going to be the null hypothesis because it includes the equality. And then, so we have our null hypothesis, we have our alternative hypothesis, and we have identified that the alternative hypothesis is the claim. The second step in the process is that we need to figure out what the critical region is. So it says that the alternative hypothesis is greater than 10. So because the alternative is greater than, we're going to be doing a right-tailed test. So the test type is always going to be figured out by using the alternative hypothesis. We're testing at 1% significance, so we need to figure out the z-value that corresponds with the upper 1% of the distribution. So we're going to come over to the calculator real quick and figure that out. We're going to go second vars, number 3. We need 1%, which will be 0.01. Mean 0, standard deviation 1. This time we're doing a right side tail. Hit enter on the word right. And we're going to paste this in. And we get 2.326. Let's see what they come up with in the presentation. 2.326, that's your critical region on the right side tail. Step 3, we're going to figure out what the z statistic, what the z-score is, based off our data. So we're using this formula that we've been given for z. When we plug our numbers in, the sample was 10.5 and the claim was 10. The standard deviation was 1.6 and the sample size was 42. When you plug all this in, you do some algebra on it, you're going to get 2.03. And notice that 2.03 is not greater than 2.326. It's not in this critical region. So step 4, whether do we reject the null or not? The null hypothesis is not rejected because the z-score is not in the critical region. The only time you reject the null hypothesis is if your z-score is in the critical region. So because we did not reject it, your conclusion is there's not enough evidence to support Jenny's claim that there's more than 10 pages of advertisements in every issue. Just summarizing that, the null hypothesis is not rejected. There's not enough evidence to support her claim. Okay, check your progress for example 4. Go ahead and pause the video, read through the problem, go through the 5-step process, and then when you have your answer, figure out, was there enough evidence to support her claim, or was there not enough evidence to support her claim? Okay, moving on. The answer to the check your progress problem is B. There is enough evidence to support Kate's claim. Okay, example 5 is on a two-sided hypothesis test. It's on calories. It says a label on a package of food states that there are 120 calories per serving. Using a sample of 38 servings, Libby calculated a mean of 120.6 calories with a standard deviation of 2.2. Test this hypothesis at 5% significance. So again, the first thing we want to do is figure out what's our claim and what's the hypotheses. So the claim in here is that there's going to be 120 calories per serving. That's what the label is telling us. That claim is exactly equal, meaning that that's going to be the null hypothesis. And the alternative hypothesis could be anything that's like, if it's more than 120, if it's less than 120, doesn't really matter. It's just that it's not 120 at that point. So the alternative hypothesis is that the mean is not equal to 120. And whenever you use not equal, that's a two-sided test because it could be more than 120 or it could be less than 120. The second step, to figure out the critical region, we need to take 5% significance and split it in half so that we have half on the left tail and half on the right tail. That means there's 2.5% on each tail. And if we go back to our calculator, we've already done that before. That's going to give us a z-score of 1.96. So we put 1.96 as the right side tail and negative 1.96 as the left side tail. So if we calculate a z-score in step 3, and our z-score is any number that's greater than 1.96 or less than negative 1.96, then we're going to reject the null hypothesis. But if it's not in that region, then we fail to reject the null hypothesis. So we're going to go through our z formula and plug in the data that's been given to us. Our sample mean was 120.6. The claim was 120 for the population mean. The sample standard deviation was 2.2 and the sample size was 38. When you simplify all this down, you're going to get 1.68. And notice again this time that 1.68 is not greater than 1.96. So that means we are going to fail to reject. We are not going to reject the null hypothesis. H naught is not rejected because the z statistic for the sample does not fall in the critical region. Step 5. Because we are not rejecting, there's not enough evidence to reject the claim that there are 120 calories per serving. Notice there's a couple typos in here. This is supposed to say 120 and this is supposed to say serving, not servicing. Okay, lastly, we have a check your progress for example 5. Go ahead and pause the video, read through the problem. You're going to be working out a two-sided test again. You need to figure out if there's enough evidence to reject or there's not enough evidence to reject the claim. Pause the video when you have your answer. Go on to the next slide. Our answer for check your progress number 5 is A. There's not enough evidence to reject this claim. That brings us to the end of lesson 6 in unit 5, and also to the end of the final lesson out of unit